To give you a very basic summary, Mark Rober released a video titled "Can You Fool a Self-Driving Car?", which features a Tesla and the word self-driving, but rather mysteriously does not use Tesla's self-driving feature a single time, despite it even being shown in the thumbnail. And full self-driving not being used is really only the tip of the iceberg of all the weirdness going on in this video. Although Mark specifically said that regular autopilot was used for the tests, there are several times it doesn't appear to be turned on at all. Like, you can see it driving down the center of the road here over double yellows, which autopilot just doesn't do. And even in the grand finale shot, autopilot does not appear to be active as it is driving through the wall. And credit for where it is due, Mark did follow up by providing the original clip of the finale showing him engaging autopilot about 3 seconds before impact, which opened up a whole nother can of worms because in the YouTube video, he turns on autopilot much sooner than that, meaning there were obviously multiple takes of this shot. Now, as you guys know, I'm not one to typically make videos calling people out for stuff, but Mark Rober stepped into my territory with this one, and to me, it is painfully obvious what's happening in some of these scenes. But the good news is that there was so much backlash about this video from people that know how autopilot and FSD work that Mark went on the Philip DeFranco show and responded to some of these allegations. And spoiler alert, I personally don't think his answers quite add up, but I will let you be the judge. To be clear, this video is entirely my opinion. My goal is not to make any accusations outright, but rather provide you with the evidence to make an informed decision for yourself. Because, in my opinion, in some of his responses, there are some red flags, but let's be real for a second. What this all boils down to is, does it really take some doofus on the internet like me to tell a former NASA engineer that in order to fool a self-driving car, you should put it in self-driving mode first? If you believe Mark's answer here, the answer to that is yes.
So first one is less of an accusation and more a question, and that was there any reason you opted to test autopilot on the Tesla instead of full self-driving?
My understanding with full self-driving is that you have to enter an address for it to work, as opposed to just being able to engage it. And this is what Tesla's called autopilot, and even Googling it, seeing what they determine as autopilot. And my understanding is that the sensor is not different, whether it's full self-driving or autopilot. Knowing if that's a wall or not, that doesn't change. So I think I'd be happy to rerun the experiment in full self-driving. I'm pretty confident it wouldn't be a different result. So to me, it was a distinction without a difference.
Let's start from the top. No, you do not need an address to activate full self-driving. It can be activated the exact same way as autopilot can be, but that, along with them both using cameras, are about where the similarities between autopilot and full self-driving end. Because Mark, let me tell you, they are entirely different technologies with vastly different capabilities. And I personally have a very hard time believing that a scientist like yourself didn't do the absolute bare minimum amount of research into the technology you're testing, because if you did, the difference between them is pretty obvious. And to basically say, well, I don't really understand the difference between them, but I'm sure the results would have been the same, is probably the most unscientific sentence I've ever heard from you, and is honestly painful to hear. Not knowing about the technology and calling it a distinction without a difference and assuming the results would be the same makes it seem like you have a complete lack of interest in the experiment that you're running and you spent a lot of money on. And if we're comparing technologies, as a big fan of yours, this is completely out of character for you. I don't want to harp on this too much before moving on, but we have people setting up clear walls to try to trick FSD and also putting it in situations where there isn't even a physical barrier present, and yet full self-driving turns around and finds a new way because it detects a large cliff. This is the technology that we want to see tested, Mark. Autopilot is not capable of anything like this, and I honestly don't think it should take someone like me to tell you that. The next thing I want to touch on is the speculation that most of these tests appear to be almost tailor-made to give LiDAR an advantage, and Mark also calls LiDAR the superior technology in this video, so this response when asked about his relationship with Luminar, the LiDAR vehicle company that was featured in the video, is pretty important.
Regarding Luminar, there have been a lot of people asking what kind of role they played. Right, the description of the video says they provided the car for testing. Did they have any say in the edit? Did they have any say in the
setup? They didn't see the edit. I really want to clear this. Luminar gave us no money. They had no say in the edit. They did not approach us. They were just a car technology I know that used LiDAR. So I reached out to them and say, hey, will you let us borrow some cars? And then they let us use the cars. So we didn't pay them to come. They did not pay us. They had no say. And we didn't know what would happen either, by the way. And we told them, look, if your LiDAR fails one of these, it goes in the video. And if Tesla would have passed all of them, by the way, that would have gone in the video. Like, I'm very agnostic. I really just wanted to see what would happen. So truly, I don't have a horse in this race.
Okay, so Mark makes it pretty clear he has no relationship with Luminar whatsoever. This wasn't a sponsored video. There was no money exchanged. Like he said, they are just a car technology that he knows about that uses LiDAR, so he reached out to them to borrow a car. And while that's not necessarily a lie, it's not really the entire truth either, as Mark and Austin Russell, who's the CEO of Luminar, are actually buddies, which Mark admits himself in what I would consider really good buddies because Austin donated $4 million to support Mark's project just a few years ago. To be clear, I have absolutely nothing against Team C's. I mean, hell, I have a bunch of Team C's merch that I bought to support the cause myself, but to gloss over this and at least not mention that you're friends with their CEO and also having one of their employees in the car running the tests for you just seems a little sketchy to me. And even more sketchy when Luminar promoted Mark's video on their homepage before quickly removing it. It makes me wonder why. And while we're on the subject of LiDAR, the way Mark framed some of these results of the tests, like the Luminar car stopping for the child mannequin behind the water spray, honestly made me laugh. Like in this case, okay, it's definitely a good thing the car stopped for the spray because there was a child mannequin behind it, but just like he showed in the video, the Luminar car had no idea there was a kid there. And if there hadn't been, it actually would have exposed one of the biggest problems with LiDAR technology. As you can see, the car is detecting the water as a wall that it cannot physically drive through, which is a known problem in self-driving vehicles that use this technology, like this very similar scenario where the Waymo gets stuck and refuses to drive through this water spray because, again, to LiDAR, this looks like a straight wall. And it can even happen with something as simple as steam raising from a manhole cover, which can absolutely stop these vehicles in their tracks. And this is the type of stuff I expect to be talked about in a Mark Rober video comparing various technologies, but instead of a deep dive into why the car stopped, this is all we get.
Until the last possible second. Another W.
That's right, just another W for Team LiDAR. Let's completely ignore the fact that your LiDAR car might emergency brake down to 0 miles an hour for some water spray. And before we move on, I want to make something clear. Although I think being buddies with the CEO of Luminar does create a conflict of interest, I do not believe this was the main reason we saw the tests being performed the way they were. And I have a hunch there is a much deeper yet simpler reason that we will talk about later. But being real for a second, if a CEO of a company donated $4 million to my project, I personally would have an extremely hard time staying unbiased while testing it. And I think Mark not even acknowledging that there was a relationship beforehand and seemingly trying to distance himself as much as possible makes things look even more suspicious. Again, I'm really not trying to make any accusations here. I'm just giving you my personal opinion. Let's move on to the grand finale scene and find out why autopilot didn't appear to be on at the time of impact.
In the clip that you posted on Twitter where you said, here's the raw footage, can you explain what it is that we're seeing and what you're trying to explain is happening in that? You said, not sure why it disengages 17 frames before hitting the wall, but my feet weren't touching the brake or gas.
So I think people were saying that I was manually just drove it through because 17 frames, by the way, is like less than a half of a second before it hits the wall. Again, I don't know why it would disengage. I was not pulling on the steering wheel. And by the way, even if I did disengage it, it's less than a half a second before you go off. The outcome would not be different. My guess is maybe the sensors, the ultrasonic sensors, which I think are on the bumper, they probably just disengage if they sense that something big is there and it just stops being in the self-driving mode or autopilot, whatever you want to call it. So that's all I'm saying is like some people clipped right after and said, look, it's not on autopilot. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm just here. Like, I don't have a horse in this race either, by the way, right? I just wanted to go out. I love my Tesla. I'll probably get a new one when they come out. I'm just here to look at the data. And I think I struck like a political nerve or something. And the video was about LiDAR, like, and all the cool ways LiDAR's used. So I felt like this was a fun test to run. And papers have been run on it. Like, can you fool a self-driving car with the Wile E. Coyote ride? Like, papers have been written on this. So it's like, well, I should just run the test. And that's what it was.
All right, so a lot of things to unpack here, but the most important thing from that clip is Mark admitting something very important. He says word for word that this was a video about LiDAR and all the cool ways LiDAR is used, which I think when you watch it is pretty clear, but then why make it seem like you're trying to do some scientific method of testing to compare two different competing technologies when that wasn't what the video was about? Like, do you really think the people who wrote those scientific papers you talked about on whether a vision-only self-driving car would run into a Wile E. Coyote wall would approve of your testing methodology here, not even using self-driving mode? I don't know, man. Let's move on to the disengagement. Mark says his best guess on what happened is that the ultrasonic sensors, which are the sensors designed for parking, which have a very short range, detected that it was going to collide with the wall and disengage autopilot all on its own. Which could make sense in theory. I mean, I have had my fair share of autopilot or FSD giving up in some critical moments, but the difference is that every time it's happened to me, I get a blasting notification with red hands that tells me to take over immediately, and we didn't see that happen in the video. So let me offer you an alternate theory on what happened based on my experience with autopilot. If you look closely, you can see Mark grasping the steering wheel very tightly, and right at the moment it disengages, the steering wheel jolts left before it returns to center. To me, it seems a lot more likely that there was enough force being put on the steering wheel at this moment that it disengages, and you can actually see the moment autopilot gives up and the steering wheel jolt left, showing the force that he had been putting on the wheel. I posted about this, and many people disagreed with me and gave me examples like this, saying, look how much force I can put on the wheel without disengaging, but the key here is sustained force. I can simulate exactly what happened in the video using only my left hand. Imagine how easy this would be if I was death gripping the wheel with both hands like he was in the video. And if you don't believe that I can tell what happened from just this one clip, don't worry, because we have another of the exact same scenario to look at a little bit later. Not that this disengagement would have changed the results by any means. I am pretty confident autopilot would have plowed right through that wall regardless, but it just bugs me that he has absolutely no interest in how the technology works and yet still says things like, oh, I don't know, I guess the ultrasonic sensors just made it give up. And to be clear, yes, there's a lot of to be clears in this video. I do not think Mark did this on purpose. I think his death grip on the wheel was justified seeing how he was driving towards a wall and was likely pretty nervous. But Mark, can you remind me again why we are talking about how much force is being applied on a steering wheel in a video about self-driving cars? Oh, okay, I gotta calm down here a little bit. Moving on to Mark's explanation on why there were two different videos spliced together showing the one grand finale event.
Regarding the raw clip and what's in the video, there have been people that say that it looks like you may have had multiple takes or possibly gone through the wall multiple times. Were there multiple takes? What can you give any insight there?
There was. I mean, this is like what you put in end video. So the first day we went out there, I think you can even see it. There was we didn't have like the styrofoam wall. It was just like a vinyl sheet. And it was clear if you just drive up with it, you know, you can see it, the Tesla tells you the math of what it's looking at. And if you drive up to this wall with the road, it doesn't register anything. It doesn't register a cone. It's so like whatever the math that it's doing in the computer, it doesn't register when you paint a road that something's there. Like even if you just drive up to it. So anyways, we did a take. It went right through. I think that was the one that maybe was at 40 miles an hour or something. But it was just like, instead of cutting through it, like which would visually look cool, it just kind of tore the side and like a little flap came up. So it was like, that was a very interesting finding that it actually worked. And by the way, I'm happy to give you the raw footage of that take too. So you'll see it going through the wall, but it's more of a flap. And then we're like, holy crud, I can't believe that really worked. And then I don't know, like 3 weeks later, we went back out when schedule permitted, this time with like a styrofoam wall. Because I thought it'd be funny if it's like, well, now that it goes through the walls, we should have like a fun cutout as it goes through. So I guess in the edit, then we used the start of one of those clips. So it went through the wall twice. Once when it was just kind of a flap, and then second when it actually was. And I understand. So I guess that's the confusion there.
So the clip that you posted online or on Twitter was the one where the raw of you actually going through it the second time?
Yes, that's the second time. Whereas the cool styrofoam and like the cutout, right? Sure. The first time you'll see, it's just like a vinyl print. It kind of just, the flap ripped up on the side. So it just didn't look as interesting.
Again, so much to unpack here. Let's go ahead and start with the new video that we get to see of the first attempt of the grand finale that was apparently shot a few months before. And what do you know? Another disengagement right before hitting the wall, showing Mark death gripping the wheel and the exact same leftward steering wheel jerk as soon as the autopilot lines disappear. So keyboard warriors, feel free to continue telling me how wrong I am about this, but I gotta say the evidence is mounting up. Mark also said some things during this response that I find very interesting and which go directly against things he said previously. Earlier in the interview, he said that his car's ultrasonic sensors must have detected the wall and forced off autopilot, but now he is saying the car was never able to detect the wall even when driving directly up to it because of whatever algorithms the car's computers were running. But ultrasonic sensors would have definitely been able to detect that wall, and he definitely has the ultrasonic sensor visualizations turned on, as you can see throughout his video. So I would love to have an explanation for this one, as I find it very improbable that Vision suddenly decided to override the ultrasonic sensors and displayed nothing in front of the car, even when he said he drove right up to it. Or maybe I'm not understanding his statement correctly. Please let me know in the comments. He also says there wasn't anything on the screen that showed the wall, which makes sense as autopilot doesn't show you any of that, self-driving does. Autopilot only shows the lane lines and the other vehicles around. You do not get to see anything from the occupancy network, like when walls or random objects it can't classify are detected, because that's not something that's used for autopilot. Before I tell you what I think is the most likely thing that happened with this video, let's watch one last clip of Mark's response when asked about a potential lawsuit in all of this.
I've seen some folks like, I think it was Meet Kevin, saying that there's a possibility of a lawsuit. Do you have any concerns over that based off of the video or anything like that?
No, because it's like, I mean, anyone can sue in America, so I guess, but I think we could get it dismissed pretty quickly because it's like, I just have nothing to hide and I have no ulterior motive here. No one's paying me. I have no stock. I have no shorting. I'm planning on getting another Tesla I don't even have politically, apparently it's a political issue. I don't even have a horse in this race.
Sure. And then the last thing is just, is there any general reaction or statement or anything you want to throw in there that you feel like wasn't addressed by the questions that I've thrown at you, which or anything like that?
No, I just I love my Tesla. It's one of my favorite. I'm really just here for the data. I really don't have a horse in this race. And I realize now we plan these videos a year in advance. So the idea that this was timed because of political stuff, a year and a half ago, this was on our docket and we've been marching towards releasing this. So I plan on upgrading my Tesla in 6 months. So I'm just here for the data. And I don't think it means they're self-driving or is terrible as in it's gonna get better, but yeah, what happened, and if you could easily recreate, and what happened, and anyone with a Tesla can easily recreate exactly what I did. So
well, I've definitely seen that there's been talk of trying to recreate it, so it's going to be interesting to see if that happens, what the results will be. But for now, thank you so much for the time, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
I want to start by saying to Mark, on the very small possibility that you're watching this, I would love to recreate this test with you and can offer you my car running the latest publicly available version of full self-driving and also the latest autopilot hardware. I will sign any liability waivers you want. I really don't care if my car gets damaged. I would just truly love to recreate this test, but don't have the resources to do it. We wouldn't need much, just a few cameras to record the whole thing and the barrier that looks like it might be able to be reused from your last video, and I will drive to you to do it. And if you choose not to, that's fine, but definitely get full self-driving and rerun those tests, because I don't think making statements like this without actually using self-driving is valid.
So I can definitively say for the first time in the history of the world, Tesla's optical camera system would absolutely smash through a fake wall without even a slight tap on the brakes.
Moving on the subject of if I think Tesla should take any type of legal action against Mr. Rober, the answer is absolutely not. I truly do believe that Mark did not expect the kind of backlash that he's getting for this, and thought of it as a fun test, just like he said. And I really still do believe he is a data-driven scientist at heart, but maybe didn't care about this test as much as he should have, and it came off as way more of a hit piece than a science-driven test. Instead of suing him, I hope the Tesla AI team uses videos like these as fuel to make their product even better, and I have a strong feeling they do. So now that I have hopefully proven to you that the methodology of these tests were kind of done shoddily, no offense, Mark, the big question is why? Why did Mark put so little effort into learning about the system he was testing when apparently he had a year and a half to prepare for it? Especially with how much work you put into learning about the subjects in your other videos, it just doesn't make sense and almost seems irrational. I have no proof for what I'm about to say, as Mark keeps his beliefs very close, which is extremely smart, but there is a certain controversial individual, let's just say his name begins with E and ends with Lon, that happens to make a lot of very smart people act irrationally. Zach from Jerry Rigs is a very smart and kind-hearted person who does a lot of good in the world with his wheelchair business, but any technology that comes from Tesla, he cannot seem to separate from Elon, which makes him say things like rest in peace to full self-driving in replying to the Mark Rober video, and when informed that full self-driving wasn't used, he says, well, it doesn't exist anyways, in the same post. He also recently tested Cybertruck's tongue weight, and even when it held over 10 times its rated capacity, he told the viewers they probably shouldn't trust it for towing. It's almost like he didn't get the results he wanted, but in the end, the summary was going to be the same. And like I said, I really believe he is a kind-hearted and smart person, but he has also called Elon's child a human shield, and the amount of hate that you have to have for somebody to say something about their child just blows my mind and shows through in several of his videos. Zach is definitely vocal about his stance on things, but we also have people like MKBHD who do a little bit better of a job at keeping beliefs to himself, but lets them slip through sometimes, and it is clear he is not a big supporter of Elon either, which in turn makes him kind of ignore Tesla's technology. I mean, he couldn't be bothered to do a simple Google search before telling people how efficient Tesla's wireless charging could possibly be, and had to be directly called out by Tesla. He doesn't seem to have this lack of knowledge and apparent lack of interest for any of the other products he talks about, even when he doesn't like them. And it shows through in other ways as well, like the video he made just a couple months ago comparing the supposed latest and greatest self-driving technology from every manufacturer.
The idea behind this test was, okay, self-driving cars are somewhere in the future off on the horizon, but what's the best available right now? What is actually the best that each of these manufacturers has to offer?
And he goes through all these brand new cars from all these manufacturers, but when he gets to the segment featuring full self-driving, what is his Tesla of choice? A previous generation Model 3 with Hardware 3 and FSD 12.5, a version that isn't capable of reversing, doesn't have end-to-end on highway, and is missing several other key features that had been released for quite a while before he made that video. Of course, it still topped the list because even Tesla's previous generation technology is vastly better than anything else that people are putting out, but why not show the world what full self-driving is capable of when your goal is to show the latest and greatest from everybody? Do you think that maybe he just didn't know any better or couldn't get his hands on a current generation Model 3 for testing? I think the probability of either of those being true is about the same probability that Mark Rober couldn't afford the $99 to turn on self-driving in his Model Y. So although I have no idea what Mark's beliefs are, I do know that the situation surrounding Elon has made many rational people act completely irrationally. In my opinion, there is no excuse to care so little about the test you're doing that you don't know anything about the technology being used. And I think it's very possible that it was a subconscious thing, just like I don't think MKBHD set out with the goal of showing Tesla's previous generation technology, and I'm sure Zach from Jerry Rigs truly does believe he's giving fair reviews of Tesla-related stuff. Okay, I feel like I'm getting a little bit out of line here. Definitely strayed too far into the weeds, which makes me a little nervous because I definitely don't want to start a legal battle with any of these people, as their piggy bank is likely much larger than mine is. But this doofus has one last piece of advice for Mark. I know you think the backlash from this video from the Tesla community has been immense, but I assure you it pales in comparison to the Apple versus Android debate. So the next time you use an iPhone to film your videos and want to make it look like an Android, make sure there's no missing frames and you put the Google logo in the correct orientation next time. Until the next one, everybody. Bye.